It's Sunday the 1st of August 2010. My name is Martin Poole, and before I get into today's podcast episode, I really want to introduce this new concept for the Information podcast series. This is what I'm going to describe as a free-flowing podcast. Up until this point, our episodes have been based on carefully crafted, pre-recorded episodes based on a script or at least something that we've pre-written, something researched. But from this point on, whenever I upload an episode to this podcast, I'm one of the two that will do that, myself and Peter Poole. It will be more of a free-flowing nature. And today, I'm joined with my close friend Alan Brown, who's a researcher into the nature of reality. He's had a keen interest in this topic for years now. We're going to discuss something that I think Alan has researched and discovered, certainly over the last few months, something that's become very important in his life, which is simply the secret. So in this episode, we're going to discuss what the secret is. It's something that perhaps is part of the sort of media collective consciousness now. It's a concept that's discussed sometimes on TV, so it has found that mainstream audience to a certain extent. But it's quite a broad topic, and it's something that I think it's important to perhaps establish and define. So Alan, really, I think the simple question to ask you in order to start this is, what is the secret?
Hello everyone. The secret is something I came across a few years ago in a different understanding, something called the law of attraction. Something that had quite a profound impact on me, realizing that I did have a tool to negotiate this reality. When it comes to the secret, it all lies within you. Your own belief in yourself, if you will. Careful to avoid belief structures. The idea of you being able to shape your experience as you choose is this new frontier at the moment, well, at least from my perspective. When you start to communicate with the universe, there's certain things that you need to work with, such as you need to learn to understand the feeling of gratitude in yourself. It seems to be a way to communicate with the universe in terms of your own emotions and your own feelings towards it. So if you can learn to find that experience of gratitude, that is something that will help you perpetuate the cycle. Basically you would put your request down on paper or a mental note and keep your focus on it. Something that would
give you a result, perhaps, sort of facilitate an outcome, something that you want, a conclusion in life, perhaps.
Correct, yes. To be able to put that together, there are a few different approaches. One that we've touched on before as well, called sigil magic.
Yeah. And I mean, just to perhaps expand on that, I mean, sigil magic is one of those areas of knowledge that I think people would do well to know a little bit more about. But it's this idea that it's based on going back to chaos magic. It comes from that school of magic, and it's this idea that you can create a sigil, i.e. a symbol, based on a sentence that represents your will. And what you do is you manufacture a symbol based on the letters that make up this sentence, and you do it in such a way where your conscious mind, to your conscious mind, it's just a symbol, it's meaningless, but your subconscious mind understands what that symbol represents, and in effect it somehow taps into the universe, and it's like a symbol of desire in its purest form. And it seems to have an effect on the universe in terms of it's like a request. But the hard thing about sigil magic, and I think perhaps this is what differs from the secret, is with sigil magic, the challenge is in actually being able to trigger the sigil in order to enable it. And there's a lot of theory on how you go about actually activating a sigil. You can't just look at it, because your conscious mind is always aware of what you've done in terms of preparation. So what, to give you an idea, I mean, as you know, Alan, some of these trigger techniques are ridiculous. It's things like almost strangling yourself,
Masturbation.
yeah, absolutely, and you reach that point of climax where you consciously don't comprehend the symbol, but you just perceive it. And other ideas are you pin it to your ceiling, so when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you see is your sigil, and for perhaps a second, you don't know what it is, but then that's enough to trigger the sigil. Your subconscious mind will actually activate it in that split second. But I think with the secret, I mean, it's my understanding that it's more of a mental concept. It's more about, I mean, am I right in saying it's kind of positive mental thinking at its root form?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be able to sort of set it in motion, you do have to learn. You do have to change your mind from a negative perspective into a positive perspective. It seems to be the way to communicate, because obviously you'll put a lot of emphasis on something that you're focusing on positively. The idea really is to program this into your mind and then to learn to communicate with the universe. May sound quite far-fetched to some, but this is obviously the new frontier, learning to communicate. You touched on sigil magic earlier, and that's obviously where, well, at least for me, this all started becoming quite profound, realizing that there was a link to the Middle Ages, maybe the whole magic idea that was circling.
It goes back to sort of Aleister Crowley, really.
Yes.
That sort of school of magic. And when we say magic, we don't mean magic in the sort of Paul Daniels style hocus pocus. We're talking about the sort of traditional sense of magic. Magic spelled MAGICK. The sort of the true magic, the form of magic that really it's an entire knowledge base now that's been forgotten or intentionally sort of thrown under the rug of the sort of social mind consensus.
Religious witch hunts.
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, sigil magic. That I think that's where ultimately it roots from. But I mean, I do think there is that parallel, though, as you say, Alan. There does seem to be this interesting parallel between what sigil magic achieves and what the secret offers people. It seems to be a way, and it's almost like a hack. It seems to be a way of generating an outcome in your life, and instead of hoping for an outcome, you somehow trigger the outcome, you request it even, and the request seems to get granted.
Just as if you were to have a genie.
Yeah, right, absolutely. And I think perhaps even that metaphor that is actually the metaphor for the secret. Even you could even argue that, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I think it is. There's certainly that link there, and positive mental thinking. Absolutely, there's obviously a clear parallel with that concept as well.
That's why to have those two tools available, if someone were exploring these possibilities, is essential, because obviously with the hack, if you do struggle to find your own belief in this, to create this yourself through the law of attraction, the secret, the sigil will actually illustrate this for you, as a way to just force your subconscious into this request that you've made, and bring it about. So when it comes to choosing between the two, I wouldn't have a suggestion either way, because obviously each person differs. But for myself, the secret has probably been the most beneficial, because that does start to create a dialogue with yourself and the universe, and retrain your mind along a positive along a positive path, which obviously a lot of people neglect. So there is a byproduct of the secret which is very universally beneficial to all of us, in terms of us all starting to think a little bit more positively about our existence. Therefore maybe cancelling a lot of the negativity in the world, such as crime and such. I mean, there was that explanation, that there was that endeavour in New York where they had a dozen monks that were meditating on the idea of peace and love.
Yeah.
And they spoke to the authorities in New York and said, you will have a 20% reduction in crime.
Okay.
And after 2 weeks of meditation, there had been a 20% reduction in crime through that period. So there's a lot to be said about your mentality infecting the world around you, and its effect on the world around you.
It's interesting you should mention that, Alan, because in a way that raises the topic that I wanted to sort of cover regarding the secret next, which is this idea that okay, so you're doing this technique, you're telling the universe what you want through a mental trigger, if you like, in terms of putting a request out there. But what I think the danger is, and it's important to take this into account, is sometimes it's hard to know how the universe is going to shape itself in order to get that outcome. And it could be an unpredictable, a very unpredictable sort of a series of events that could occur in order for your outcome to actually happen. Things have to be shifted in place, like wheels in motion, cogs in a machine. Things start churning and turning.
It brings the phrase "careful what you wish for" to mind.
Absolutely, and I think my reaction to The Secret when I sort of found out that it's this universal truth, if you like, is sometimes it's important to take that into account. This idea that you've got to be careful what you wish for, essentially, because you're not in this. It's never easy to know how the universe is going to shape this outcome for you in terms of what's going to happen in order to get what you want. And a very good example, I think, is the obvious example, is what's the one thing that people en masse would wish for if they knew that this actually worked, and it's money.
Materialism.
Yeah, it's abundance of money. And
can't blame them in the current situation,
no,
I suppose.
Absolutely not. But
at the same time, there is that byproduct that will come about with them wanting to do material gain anyway. They will have to learn to be positive, and they will have to learn to communicate with the universe.
Yeah.
In order to achieve that.
But what concerns me is something that I think we've discussed this in detail in the past, is that when you wish for something like an abundance in money, things that can happen that you may not necessarily want, but it's the only way you can get your money. So, for example, there may be a relative that you've got, and you don't know this, but secretly they've got 100,000 in the bank stored for you when they pass away. But you don't want them to die. But what you're doing by triggering this reaction or this event in terms of the universal process of things is you might be actually triggering their death, because their death will facilitate that amount of funds becoming available for you. So you have got what you want, but you've not really got
at
what cost, and the outcome is something you could never have predicted because you didn't know that they had this money.
Yeah.
So one thing that I learned when I sort of experimented with sigil magic, I've not really done it recently, but this is a few years ago. One thing that I quickly learned was that unless you're absolutely specific about what you want and how you want it, the universe will actually play a bit of a game with you. Things will happen in your life that you just can't predict, and they're not always the sort of outcomes you want. They're things that you don't want, i.e. the death of a relative or some bizarre turn of events that means great changes in your life that may not necessarily be welcome at first, at least.
It does beg the question that has plagued me for the last few months. The idea behind personal gain, the idea behind karma, the idea behind a natural order of things that cannot be hijacked for your own personal interest. Well, it can, but it shouldn't, if there is such a thing as what should and should not be. It's something that really does bother me. I appreciate that it's that it's steeped in tradition. It's steeped in superstition. The old witchcraft idea of personal gain, and I don't exactly know how relevant that is, but it has been intriguing me. I would assume that there would be a need for some form of balance, and that would definitely be it. So I don't dismiss it entirely, but I'm interested to hear your perspective on the idea of personal gain and karma in relation to all of this.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, Alan, it's a hard one. I mean, I'm still not entirely convinced that there is such a thing as karma, and I think we've had this discussion in the past. I mean, Alan's take on this is that he does have this intuitive sense that there is, and I am still not entirely convinced that this is some sort of objective truth. It's more, in my opinion, it's more this belief that a lot of people have, and because it's such an established belief, certainly in a sort of New Age context, it has generated its own existence, its own sort of, in sort of Robert Anton Wilson speak, its own reality tunnel. It exists because of this belief that people have in it as a concept.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Sure, but see, on the same level, I do appreciate the fact that something of the nature of karma is a desirable thing to exist, because it represents justice. It represents a sort of sense of balance in the universe. We don't want people running amok and there being no real, sort of outcome. There's no real sort of judgment on their part.
But that does exclude the idea of chaos, which we do know exists in our reality. So, yeah, it is a very difficult one. I definitely share your perspective on the idea of we can create these mechanisms, which then we make as our belief structures, and that obviously just influences everything. It's definitely a difficult one. I can't quite make a decision either way. To me, I would assume that there would be some form of balancing feature in this experience, just to make sure that we don't all just fly off the cuff.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But again, I wholly appreciate what you're suggesting, and that's obviously the experiences as you make it. And any little idiosyncrasies, any little ideas that crop up along the way do filter into our experience and do make themselves our reality. So if I do focus on this idea of personal gain, etc., karma, I might just be making that my reality and denying my true potential. So again, this is why it is a difficult thing for me at the moment. I am just sort of reflecting on it and seeing where I come out. But yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's the crucial mindset to have on this. It's a sort of open-mindedness.
Yeah.
But just going back really broadly. See, one of the things. Alan knows this, so I'll make it clear. One of the problems that I have with The Secret is the the sort of gloss factor of the way that whoever these guys are that put this. Just to make it absolutely clear to people, The Secret, in terms of this sort of,
how it's represented.
The Secret in terms of the product, if you like, is essentially a DVD. It's a film, and the Secret represents a universal truth. But see, whoever these guys are that put this film together, I think it was 2005 the film first came out, and it's still obviously very popular on the internet. So it's not necessarily a dated film now, because the concepts established in this film are as relevant now as they would be 50 years ago if the film was made that long ago. But the thing about this DVD is it seems to have grabbed hold of this concept and used it in order to establish this product, this film. And I remember back in 2005, it was kind of marketed in this sort of viral way on the internet, where instead of the website just coming out and saying there's a film coming out on a certain date, it was all this sort of flash adverts you'd see on various alternative websites saying, "What is the secret?" question mark. You click on it, and it takes you to a website where it's just a black screen, and it says you'll find out in November 2005 or something along those lines. Yeah. And I didn't necessarily have a problem with that. But you see, the problem I have is when you now go on this website, obviously the secret is revealed in the sense that it's a DVD you need to get hold of in order to find out the secret. You know, it's one of these websites you look at it and you just think, it's for a start. It's thesecret.tv. That's the official website for the film itself. But I'm looking at it right here on my iPad, and just the language, in a way, it just doesn't seem to me to have this sort of sincerity about it. The first paragraph. The secret reveals the most powerful law in the universe. The knowledge this law has runs like a golden thread through the lives and teachings of all the prophets, seers, sages and saviours of the world's history, and through the lives of all truly great men and women. All that they have ever accomplished or attained has been done in full accordance with this most powerful law. And it's nicely written, obviously, but it's got this sort of dramatic sense to it. It's powerful stuff. But then you get to the bottom of this sort of introduction, and it's essentially saying you too can find out the secret for $9, whatever. which I don't know. I think sometimes I do get a bit cynical about this stuff, but at the end of the day, these people, they're putting out a product. I've not seen the film in years. I have to admit that. Alan is pushing me to see the film properly because I've not seen it recently. So I will make an effort to watch it.
I think to summarize it, you could say the way that The Secret is portrayed has taken it's a materialistic view of a spiritual understanding. We understand the law of attraction. They've put it across in a way that people could use to benefit their own lives, and it's very materialistic. Yes, as soon as you start to watch it, I think the first incentive is a new car, and showing you how you would go about getting it. In other words, imaging yourself driving it and just creating that reality for yourself, which then catches up with you effectively. It is a very materialistic view, but again, we've broached the subject about halfway across the river. Alex Jones, for instance. It's not a full truth, but it's an understanding that differs from general consensus, which in its own is a paradigm shift for people who haven't come any distance.
No, I definitely accept that, because one thing you notice of The Secret in the context of this website, this DVD, is it seems to be more compatible with a mainstream audience. What I mean by that is sigil magic. These obscure concepts are not necessarily digestible for most people, because there's a certain level of knowledge that's required in order to even get involved in this kind of stuff. You don't just Google sigil magic and find, and people don't do that. It's an obscure word, and it's an obscure concept. And it's the same for, ultimately this message is put forward in many forms by many different people, but this seems to be the most compatible with a mainstream sort of type of person, the kind of person that doesn't necessarily know much about the nature of reality, anything spiritual. And just to give a good example of that, I don't even like to mention it in this podcast, but the Channel 4 TV series Big Brother, which I think this year had its last run. I think it's still going in the UK now, but the last 3 episodes at least. And Big Brother is obviously this reality TV show. It was really the template for the sort of reality TV show concept, where you get 10 people, however many there are, they go and spend a few months in a house, and it's all filmed basically. And the idea is people vote off somebody at the end, and the winner's declared the last person to stay in the house, really. But anyway, I did watch the sort of opening night thing, which was a few months ago, and one thing that really struck me at the time was one of the contestants went into this house, and as they went down the stairs, obviously that whole preparation thing is a bit sort of dramatic for them, because it's you're suddenly being filmed, being watched by millions of people. She went down the stairs and she literally said something to the effect of, "Oh my God, the secret works."
Yeah.
And I was intrigued by that.
That.
And I think the one of the hosts of the show, I think Davina McCall, I think her name is, I mean, she even reacted to that by saying, "What's the secret? I don't know what that was about. Anyway, let's cut to the adverts." And that was it, because that's obviously the mentality. But obviously she was talking about the secret in the context of this, because, well, maybe she wasn't, but to say the secret works, it just in grammatical sense that she's talking about this, she's got to be talking about this, which is very interesting, and it does go to show. But I think there does seem to be this sort of, there certainly is this interest in this concept, and that I welcome that, because what I hope is people might get into this and then get more into deeper stuff. Get into the details of things, the nature of reality stuff,
consciousness. Yeah,
absolutely. But yeah, I mean that really, in a sense, I think we've discussed that really in good detail. I mean, the secret is essentially an ancient message. It's a message that comes from multiple sources, multiple people. I mean, I know that in this film there's a lot of reference to people like Robert Anton Wilson, various sort of quantum physicists, and so people are coming at this from all sorts of perspectives: scientific perspectives, religious perspectives, sort of spiritual perspectives, and it's obviously a film that, I mean, I like I said, I haven't seen it myself, or not for years at least, and I don't really remember the actual film. So I will certainly make an effort to watch this film, and I think, if I'm right, there was also a film called What the Bleep Do We Know, which is something that I think is also probably, it may have even been made by the same people. I think a lot of the people in that film were also in The Secret. And yeah, I mean, I'll accept that this is probably quite an important thing to see, because it sums things up, and I think that's key, really, because one of the problems nowadays is with the internet. It's fantastic having all of this information at our fingertips, but sometimes it's hard to draw it all together and connect the dots, as David Icke sort of famously says. He talks about the idea that the key is in connecting dots. It's in formulating the bigger picture,
following a thread. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's something that I've found hugely beneficial, because obviously we spend a lot of time talking about how exactly we could relay at least some of this information to people, and for this to come out synchronistic, beneficial, however you want to look at it, it is what's needed in the general consensus mind. There is no reference to anything like this. It's all religious metaphors and little sayings that have been developed along the way for people to live their lives by. For something totally new to come out that I appreciate lots of people are aware of, but nowhere near the majority, is just another halfway boat. It's just another point of reference that people have when you can start to talk to them about things that are not generally accepted. I mean, you've obviously had similar experiences to me when you have tried to pick up a conversation around these topics, and just viewing, just seeing the bewilderment on people's faces, and sometimes even further than that, where it's well, let's not go down a negative path, but yeah, it
seems to be, like you say, it seems to be a compatible message for most people. It doesn't require any sort of previous knowledge, or I mean, a lot of this stuff, like, you don't sort of, for example, you don't sort of say to somebody, hey, you need to go and look into Terence McKenna's take on on the transcendental objects and all this sort of thing, because people haven't got a clue what you're talking about.
No, there would be no reference.
No, absolutely. But a film like this, you can say to somebody, "Have you seen this film?" And it looks like a viable product. It looks like, for the sort of mainstream audience, it looks like something that they could quote. It's a source, if you know what I mean, a valid primary source of information. It's got that sort of element of sort of respectability to it.
And I ask you this, for Joe Average to pick up the idea of The Secret and get himself a new car, albeit completely materialistic, superficial attempt at the understanding, it would, if it came about for that person, surely that becomes a pivotal point for him. He has to accept that there is more to himself than meets the eye. The whole idea of you can't have everything you want, money doesn't grow on trees, etc., etc. All these limitations that are passed on to us through conditioning, through various people. To be able to achieve something through The Secret, I think would be the catalyst for most minds to maybe begin an exploration,
Right.
to maybe start looking around at things that don't make much sense and trying to understand. I guess I always see that in the sense, like I mentioned with Alex Jones earlier, and even in a sense with religion, with the idea that faith can move mountains, for instance. All these things being a halfway point that people could expand on, but for some reason we seem to have just left as accepted concepts and leave it at that.
Yeah.
So again, for someone to experience The Secret, I think would be the starting point for some higher thought. So again, I'm very grateful for it, even though it is a very materialistic look at a spiritual understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is key to this. It's, if you're listening to this podcast and you're, you know, in a situation in your life where you're trying to get information out there to people like close relatives, friends and family, people that you care about, then this is perhaps a good way to start, because it is, as we've stressed, it is definitely, if anything, it's definitely compatible with most people, with an audience, because it's a carefully made film, and it is. Say what you will about the production values of anything. I mean, you may think it's cheesy, or you may think it's a wonderful film. I mean, I'm personally sort of at that point where I can't really say for sure because I've not seen it in a long time, but yeah, it's got a bit of that sort of cheesiness factor to it. So I think the music, yeah, I mean, it's got certain things about it that you think, okay, it's not, you know, it's not the greatly produced piece, but at the same time, the message is the key, and the message is definitely in abundance with this film, and there's techniques here, specific techniques. But yeah, okay, well, I think that is the secret covered, if you like. So we're going to leave it there for this episode of the podcast. So yeah, stay tuned for the next episode. I think in the next one, myself and Alan will continue this free flow sort of template, and we will perhaps discuss in broader context our take on really topics as varied as, you know, the nature of the New World Order, our take on who's in control of things, right through to the sort of the deeper discussion on the nature of reality and the kind of more deep questions, if you like, the sort of spiritual deep questions. So we hope you've enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next episode.